For 15 years, I lived in their basement. It wasn't a punishment or even a choice I had made for myself. No, it was a silent, unspoken decision I made out of love for my family. I gave them everything I could, my life savings, my time, my energy. I had worked my entire life to save for my future, to have something set aside for my old age. But in one moment, I put that all aside for them. I sold my future for their dream. I gave them my savings for the down payment on their beautiful house. I covered the bills they couldn't afford. I raised their children while they built their lives. And for all that I gave, they thanked me by putting a for sale sign on the lawn and telling me to find a place. They locked me out during the open house. My life's treasures, everything I held dear, were thrown into trash bags like they didn't matter. They didn't even know who I was. They didn't know that the quiet old woman in the basement was a retired accountant. They didn't know that I kept every single receipt, every check, every transfer, every bill. It was all in my carefully kept records. I knew that they were going to learn a very expensive lesson, not just about money, but about the difference between a guest and an investor. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I get into the details of how they betrayed me, let me tell you who I am, how I got here. I was born in Lagos, Nigeria, in a large, bustling family full of love and noise. My childhood was filled with the smell of jollof rice wafting from the kitchen and the sound of laughter echoing through our home. I grew up with an understanding of what it meant to give, to sacrifice. It wasn't a question, it was just what we did. My family was everything, and I was taught to do everything for them. I worked hard. I had always been meticulous, a bit of a perfectionist. It made me good at what I did. I was an accountant, a profession that fit my orderly, careful nature. I loved working with numbers. They were simple, direct, honest. There was no ambiguity. In accounting, there were only facts, and the facts were comforting. When I moved to the United States, I brought my son Samuel with me. He was just a boy, barely 12, when we left Lagos. I had big dreams for him, dreams of a life better than mine. I knew America would offer him opportunities I couldn't have imagined. I worked hard to build a future for him, putting every bit of my energy into creating a stable life for both of us. I had to let go of the comfort of home, of my family, to give him the world I never had. The sacrifices were worth it. Samuel was my everything. He was the reason I worked day and night, the reason I saved every penny. I wanted him to have the life I never could, a life full of opportunities, a life with a beautiful house, a future, a family. I never thought I would be alone, that one day I would be left in a basement, but that's exactly where I found myself. It started when Samuel and his wife, Laila, came to me one day with a request. They had found their dream home, a beautiful two-story house in a neighborhood with good schools, a spacious yard, everything they had dreamed of. There was just one problem. The down payment was too high. I knew it was out of their reach, but they asked for my help. They were going to have a baby, and they wanted to give their child the perfect home. The house was everything to them. I could see the excitement in Samuel's eyes, and I knew this was important to him. I didn't hesitate. I had worked all my life for this. I had saved, I had planned, and this was the moment I had been preparing for. I had a nest egg, a substantial retirement fund. It wasn't much in the grand scheme of things, but it was enough for this one act of love, this one act of giving everything I had to secure their future. It didn't matter that it was my future. I was giving up. I knew I was doing it for them. I thought it was just a simple transaction, my money for their happiness, a home for their family. They would be happy, and I would be content with knowing I had helped them build a good life. Samuel promised me that they would always take care of me. "You'll live with us, Mama," he said. "We'll all be together. You'll be a part of our family, and when you're older we'll take care of you." I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. It felt right, like the perfect plan. I handed over the check that wiped out my savings, the savings I had spent a lifetime building. It wasn't just money to me, it was years of hard work, years of sacrifice. But I believed in them. I believed in my son, in my family. The day we signed the papers at the lawyer's office, Lyle held my arm, her smile as bright as ever. She reassured me that everything was going to be fine. Mom, she said, for tax reasons, it's just easier if the deed is in our names. Don't worry, it's just paperwork. You're still a part of this. This house will always be your home. I should have seen the red flags, but I didn't want to. I trusted them. My son, my daughter-in-law, they were my family. I didn't need to look further. So I signed the papers, agreeing to be the gifter, not the investor. I didn't know it then, but that one small detail would haunt me for years to come. And so, I moved into their home. I didn't take one of the bedrooms upstairs. They had renovated the basement for me, making it a comfortable private space. I told myself it was for the best. I told myself that it was just the American way, to give the elderly their own space. But deep down, I had sacrificed everything for this family. My savings, my home, my future. For the next 15 years, I became a part of their lives. I helped raise their children. I cooked, cleaned, and did whatever I could to support them. I never asked for anything in return. I just wanted to be part of their lives, to see them grow, to help them build their future. But as the years passed, something started to shift. I started to notice that I wasn't really a part of their family anymore. I was just a fixture, someone who took up space. But I didn't say anything. I didn't complain, because that's what I had been taught. I was doing this for them, for my family, for my son. That was the price of love.
Before I continue, I want to ask all of you to please give a like to this video and subscribe to my channel, The Silent Stories, for more stories like mine. Your support means the world to me. Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop a comment telling me which country you're tuning in from. It's incredible to see how far this community of wonderful people has grown, and I'm so grateful to be able to share my story with you.
I remember the first time Samuel and Laila came to me with the news of the house they had found. It was the kind of house you see in magazines, large, welcoming, the kind of place families dream of. I could see it in their eyes, that spark of excitement. This was more than just a house to them. It was their American dream, their future, a place where their children would grow up in a safe, beautiful neighborhood. The backyard was large, perfect for the kids to run around. The school district was top-rated, everything they ever wanted seemed within reach, and all they needed was a little help to make it a reality. I didn't hesitate when they told me about the down payment. I could see how badly they wanted this home. Samuel's face lit up as he described the house. "It's perfect, Mom," he said. "We'll have a home to raise our family in, a place we can call our own." And there it was, the unspoken promise in his words, the one that made me believe in everything they told me. A promise that we would always be together. A promise that I would never be alone. But as they spoke, I saw the hesitation in their eyes. They didn't say it outright, but I could feel it. This was too big for them, too far out of reach. The down payment was a number I couldn't even fathom, a sum that felt like a mountain too steep to climb. They needed my help, and that's when they asked, "Mama, we've been looking at this house, and it's everything we've dreamed of," Laila said, her voice soft but full of hope. "But the down payment is more than we can manage right now. We're not asking for much, just a little help to get started." Samuel echoed her, his voice full of that same hope. "I've got a great job, Mama. Laila is doing well in real estate. But this is just one step we can't make alone." I wanted to say no. I wanted to keep my savings, to have something for myself in my old age. I had worked my whole life for that. I had built it up with patience and sacrifice. But then I looked at their faces, the hope, the excitement, and my heart melted. I couldn't say no. This was my son, my family. I had spent years working as an accountant, saving every penny, making sure I had a stable future. But what good was that if I couldn't use it to help those I loved? What good was security if the people I loved the most were struggling, unable to reach their dreams? So I made the decision. I would give them the money, all of it, my entire savings, the money I had set aside for my retirement. I gave them the down payment without a second thought. I thought about what this house would mean to them, to their children, and how it would provide them with everything they wanted. I thought about the joy I would feel watching my grandchildren grow up in that house. It seemed like the right thing to do. When I handed them the check, I didn't think about the sacrifice. I didn't think about what I was losing. I thought only of their happiness. It felt like the right thing. The only thing. Samuel looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Thank you, Mama," he said. "This means the world to us. We'll make sure you're always taken care of. You won't regret this." Laila, too, was full of gratitude. She hugged me tightly. "You're part of this family forever, Mama. This house is yours as much as it is ours. You'll never have to worry about anything. We'll always be together." And that was the promise. A promise of a new life. A promise that we would all be together, always. I should have known, but I wanted to believe them. I wanted to trust that this house, this dream, would bring us all closer. And in that moment, I had no reason to doubt them. I gave them the money, signed the papers, and thought it was just the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. The lawyer told me it was a simple formality. Laila explained the legal details, that the deed should be in their names only for tax reasons. It would be cleaner, simpler. She assured me that it was just a formality. She said the house was mine, that we would all live together. Samuel nodded, his face full of trust. "It's just easier, Mama. For taxes, for everything. But don't worry, this house is yours too. We're all in this together." I wanted to believe them, and so I did. I signed the papers. I handed over everything. My future, my retirement, my peace of mind. All for them, all for their dream. In the end, it seemed like a fair trade. I would be with them. I would help raise their children. I would cook their meals, clean their home, and share in their joys. And in return, I would have a place in their family. I would never be alone. I didn't know then what I know now, that I had just signed away more than just my savings. I had signed away my future, my dignity, and my place in their lives. But I didn't see it coming. At the time, it all seemed so simple, so full of love. And for a while it was, but slowly, things began to shift. It wasn't immediate, but over time, I felt it. The distance, the silence, the quiet exclusion. I was no longer a part of the family, in the way I thought I would be. I had given them everything, but what was I left with? Would I ever get back what I had given? Would I ever have my place in the family again? But I wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. I told myself to hold on, that everything would work out. But little did I know, the cracks in the foundation were already there. And soon, they would break open, revealing something I had never expected. It wasn't just the house that I was investing in. It wasn't even just money. It was trust. I believed in them, in my family. I believed that helping them build their dream meant that we were all part of something bigger, something that would hold us together. I had always been the quiet one, the one who gave without asking for anything in return. But in those moments at the lawyer's office, I began to see the first subtle signs of a deal that would eventually unravel everything I thought I understood about family. When we sat in that sterile wood-paneled office with the lawyer, I didn't expect to hear what I did. It was a simple enough discussion at first about the house and the mortgage. The lawyer shuffled papers and explained the technicalities of the purchase. But then the conversation shifted to the title of the house. Laila, ever the smooth talker, reached over and touched my arm, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Mom," she said, her voice filled with warmth. She had that smile, the one that always made me soften. "We've talked it over with our real estate lawyer. For tax purposes, It just makes more sense if the deed is in Michael's and my name. We've been told that if your name is on it, it complicates things for estate planning and capital gains later on. I looked at her, confused. But I'm giving you the money. It's my savings. I thought. My voice trailed off as the reality of what was being said started to dawn on me. Michael, sitting next to me, avoided my eyes. It's just a formality, Mama, he said, his tone careful, as though he was trying to smooth over any worry I might be feeling. It's for paperwork reasons. It'll make everything simpler in the long run. A small alarm went off in my head, one I couldn't ignore. My accountant's mind began to ask questions, to question everything about this transaction. But my heart, my trusting heart, didn't want to listen. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that this was simply a formality, just another piece of paperwork to get through. Laila saw the hesitation in my eyes. "Don't worry, Mama," she reassured me, her voice sweet. "You're part of this. We're just doing this for tax reasons. The house is still yours. We're never going to sell it. We'll all live here together." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust my son, my family, so badly. I had worked my whole life to give them everything, to create a future for them. I thought this was part of that future. I thought this was what family was supposed to be, a safe place where you could trust each other, no matter what. So, I signed. I signed the papers that stated I was a gifter, not an investor. I handed over the check for the down payment, wiping out my savings in one go, and I thought it would all be worth it. I thought it was just a small legal detail that didn't matter. After all, they were family. But looking back now, I can see how carefully they had set up the deal, how subtle the manipulation was. They knew I would never question them. They knew that all I wanted was for them to be happy. So they played on that. They played on my love for them, my desire to see them succeed. They knew I would sign away everything I had. The house became theirs. Officially. My name was nowhere on the deed, and I was left with nothing but the quiet, creeping feeling that something was wrong. But I pushed those feelings aside. After all, what was a little paperwork? We were family, and that was all that mattered. But deep down, I felt the weight of what I had done. I had given them my life savings, and in return, I had nothing but promises and reassurances. They were my family, but at that moment, I was a stranger in my own home. I had helped them build their future. But what was I building for myself? And then, as I moved into the basement, I began to realize how little I truly had in this new life. The basement was a nice space. It was comfortable, but it wasn't mine. It wasn't the place I had imagined when I first dreamed of helping them. I had given everything to make their dream come true, but in doing so, I had given up my own. They told me it was for my comfort. They told me that the basement would be my private space, my retreat, and it was in a way. But it wasn't the home I had imagined when I thought about our future together. It wasn't the family that I had sacrificed everything for. It was a new reality, one where I was no longer at the center. I had given them everything, but in return, I was becoming invisible. The basement, with its small kitchenette and its own bathroom, became my world. It was where I lived, where I cooked and cleaned, where I watched my grandchildren grow. I poured my love into that home, but I began to feel the emptiness that came with being sidelined, with being removed from the heart of their family. I wasn't just a guest anymore. I was a silent observer, invisible in the very space I had helped create. It wasn't the deal I had imagined when I first signed those papers. It wasn't the family I had hoped to build, but I stayed. I stayed because I believed in them, because I believed in the promise of family. I believed that someday things would return to the way I had imagined. I believed that someday I would have my place back. But little did I know, I was already losing it. For 15 years, I was the heartbeat of that home, the invisible thread holding it all together. I was the one who made sure the kids were fed, the house was clean, and the bills were paid. I became the silent contributor, a background figure whose presence was so constant that no one even thought to question it. It wasn't a big deal at first. It was what I did. It was who I was. I wasn't just a mother to Samuel and Laila. I was a caretaker, a provider, the steady hand that kept things running smoothly in the background. Every morning, I woke up before the sun. I made breakfast, a warm meal for the children before they left for school. I made sure they had lunch packed, their clothes were clean, and their backpacks ready. I watched Junaid and Nia, my grandchildren, grow from toddlers into school-aged children, marking their height on the doorframe of the basement. I was there, a constant presence in their lives. I shared stories of my childhood in Lagos, teaching them our language, our food, our culture. I wanted them to know where they came from, to be proud of their roots. I was also the one who cooked dinner every night. I'd spend hours in the kitchen, making everything from jollof rice to suya, filling the house with smells that reminded me of home. They all loved it. Samuel, Laila, the kids. I thought of it as a small, simple way to contribute, a way to give them something they couldn't get from anyone else. It felt good, it felt right, but it wasn't just the domestic work. I also handled the finances. As a retired accountant, I couldn't help myself. I tracked every cent, every expense, the heating bills, the grocery receipts, the electric bills. I paid them all. I quietly transferred money into the accounts to make sure the house stayed warm in the winter, that there was food in the fridge, that nothing ever went unpaid. I didn't ask for anything in return. It was my responsibility, my duty. But more than that, it was my gift to them. I wanted them to succeed, to live their best life. I wanted to ensure that their family never had to struggle the way I had when I first moved to this country. And I did it all quietly, without complaint. I thought that's what mothers do, give everything for their children. But as the years passed, the work became more and more invisible. No one noticed. No one asked how I was doing or if I needed help. I was just there doing what I always did. The basement became my world. I told myself it was okay. I told myself that it was part of the bargain. I had given up my savings, my future, but I had gained something in return, my family. But deep down, I began to wonder. I started to feel like an outsider, a guest in my own home. I'd spent all my life working for others, making sure their needs were met. But when it came to me, no one noticed. My needs, my desires, my voice were lost in the shuffle of their busy lives. Samuel and Laila were building their careers, chasing their dreams. Junaid and Nia were growing up and becoming more independent. And I was in the background, always there, always serving, always giving. They didn't even notice when I stopped talking about my old dreams. I had always wanted to travel, to go back to Lagos and visit the places I had left behind. But that dream faded. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself that helping them achieve their dreams was enough. But it wasn't. The silence was deafening. They never asked me how I was doing. They never asked me what I wanted. They never seemed to notice when I wasn't around, when I stopped contributing to the endless cycle of household chores. I didn't want to be a burden, but I felt like one. As the years passed, I started to feel smaller, less important. I became nothing more than the background noise in their lives. A helper, a caretaker, and nothing else. But I never said anything, because that's not what mothers do. We don't ask for things. We don't demand attention. We just give, and give, and give. I didn't want to be selfish. I didn't want to cause trouble. So I kept quiet. I kept my feelings to myself, tucked away in the corner of my heart. The more I gave, the more invisible I became. And the more invisible I became, the harder it was to speak up, to ask for what I needed. But deep inside, I knew something had changed. The balance had shifted. The family I had built for them had slowly become their own, and I was no longer the central figure. I was no longer the heartbeat of their home. I had become a ghost in the basement, just another piece of furniture, something to be tolerated but not truly seen. And then, one morning, I walked into the living room, and I saw the for sale sign in the front yard. The morning I saw that for sale sign, my world stopped. I was returning from my morning walk, my usual route around the quiet suburban streets, trying to stay active despite my age. The sun was still low, casting a soft golden light across the neatly trimmed lawns of our neighborhood. It was peaceful, almost serene, and then I turned the corner, and there it was. The sign stood tall in the yard, stark against the green grass, its bold lettering cutting through the calm of the morning. For sale, I froze. I couldn't breathe for a moment, my heart racing in my chest, as if I had been struck by something heavy. My mind didn't want to accept it. It couldn't. I must have been mistaken. Maybe it was for a neighbor's house. Perhaps it was a mistake, an error in the placement of the sign. But no, I squinted at the address. It was ours. I couldn't move at first. My feet felt glued to the sidewalk. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, staring at that sign, trying to make sense of it. How could this be? How could they be selling our home? The home I had helped them buy, the home I had helped build with my own hands. I walked up the driveway, my steps slow, unsure. I knew what I had to do, but I didn't want to believe it. The door was unlocked, as it always was. I stepped inside, my heart in my throat, my stomach in knots. I found Samuel in the kitchen, pouring himself a cup of coffee, his back to me. His movements were casual, as though nothing had changed. But when he heard me, he turned around. The smile on his face faltered when he saw me standing there. I could feel the tension in the air before I even spoke. "Samuel," I said, my voice trembling, "there's a sign in the yard. For sale," he sighed, as if I were asking something trivial, something unimportant. "Oh, don't worry about it, Mama," he said, brushing it off with a wave of his hand. "Kimberly is just testing the market. The housing market is crazy right now. We're just seeing what the house might be worth." I stared at him, my heart sinking. "You're selling it," I whispered. "You're really selling the house?" "No, no, no, Mama," he said quickly, his voice rising with urgency. "It's just an appraisal. We're not going anywhere. This is your home, Mama. We're not selling." But I wasn't convinced. I could see the nervousness in his eyes. I could see that something wasn't right. He wasn't looking at me the way he used to. The way a son looks at his mother, full of love and trust. His eyes kept darting to the floor, and the words didn't match the look on his face. Something was wrong. "This is your home," he repeated. But there was no conviction behind it. The words felt empty, hollow. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that nothing had changed, that this was just a misunderstanding. But something inside me, the part of me that had always been the careful, meticulous accountant, couldn't ignore the feeling that something was terribly off. The fact that he was trying so hard to reassure me made me even more suspicious. It was too easy, too quick. A lie wrapped in a promise. I nodded though, trying to calm myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't just an appraisal. This was something far more deliberate. I had given everything for this family, for this home, and now it was slipping away without a single word of explanation. They were already making plans, talking about their next move, and I was being left behind in the dust. I stayed silent, letting Samuel's reassurances wash over me, like they always did, but the doubt was there. It gnawed at me, growing louder in my mind. I had no proof, nothing solid to hold on to, but I could feel it. The cracks in the foundation were already there, hidden beneath the surface, and I was starting to realize that the home I had worked so hard to build, the one I had sacrificed everything for, was no longer mine, and yet I stayed. I stayed because I didn't know what else to do. I had nothing left but this house, this family. I couldn't bear to lose them both. That night, as I went to bed, the weight of what had happened settled over me, like a thick blanket, smothering my every thought. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the sounds of their laughter drifting up from the floor above me. I wanted to call out, to ask what was really going on, to demand answers, but I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I did what I had done for years. I kept quiet. I stayed in my corner, in my basement, and I waited. But deep inside, I knew the truth. This wasn't just a crack in the foundation. It was the beginning of the end, and I wasn't ready to face it. Not yet, but I would have to. I would have to face it sooner or later. The moment I realized what was really happening, I felt like a stranger in my own home. The for sale sign was just the beginning, and I didn't want to face the truth. But when they locked me out of the house during the open house, everything became clear. I was no longer a family member. I was a problem, a complication that needed to be hidden away. That Saturday, Samuel and Laila told me they were taking the kids out for the day. They said it was a special family outing, something to keep the kids entertained. "You stay home, Mama. You should rest," Samuel had said. His words were kind, but the undercurrent of something else was there. An exclusion, a deliberate push for me to be out of the way. I tried not to make a big deal out of it. I'd spent years quietly in the background, helping where I could, doing what needed to be done without expecting anything in return. It was my role, my place in the family. Or so I had thought. So I took a longer walk than usual. I spent the morning at the small park near our neighborhood, watching young families laugh and play. It made me feel distant, disconnected. But I told myself it was okay. I didn't want to interfere. I had learned long ago not to be too involved. This was their life, their family. I was just a part of it, quietly in the background. When I returned to the house, I noticed the cars, expensive cars, unfamiliar to me, were parked in the driveway. A feeling of unease settled in my chest. I went to the front door, keys in hand, but it was locked. I knocked softly, then harder. There was no answer. Panic rose in my throat as I peered through the sidelight window. Inside, strangers were walking through the house, appraising everything. I saw Kimberly giving a tour, showing off the house to potential buyers. Her voice sweet and professional. My heart sank. This wasn't just a test market. This wasn't just an appraisal. This was the beginning of their exit plan. And I wasn't part of it. I knocked louder, desperate now. But when Kimberly saw me, her eyes widened in panic. She turned quickly, as if she hadn't seen me at all. She resumed her tour, as if I didn't exist, as if I was nothing more than a piece of furniture. I felt my stomach twist in shame. I walked around to the living room window and tapped gently. I could see my reflection in the glass, an old woman standing outside her own house, forgotten. When Leo, my grandson, finally appeared in the window, his eyes filled with confusion and fear, I felt a stab of pain in my chest. "Leo," I called out softly, my voice trembling. "Please, open the door. Let me in." He hesitated, his face crumpling in worry. "Grandma," he whispered, "you can't be here. Daddy said not to let you talk to anyone. He said it might confuse the buyers." Confuse the buyers. My mind spun as the words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just the house they were selling. It was me. I was the complication. I was the one who had to be hidden away, discarded like an inconvenience. I stepped back from the door, unable to speak. The humiliation of it all, the coldness, the cruelty, hit me like a wave. I stumbled away from the door, standing on the sidewalk, as the laughter of strangers inside filled the space where my family had once been. I was locked out of my own home, not just physically, but emotionally as well. The family I had given everything to had decided I no longer belonged. They had made their choice, and I was no longer part of their future. I don't know how long I stood there on the sidewalk, but when I finally turned and left, my heart was heavy with the weight of the betrayal. They had built their life, their future, and I had helped them do it. I had invested everything, my savings, my time, my love, into this family. But now, I was nothing but an unwanted guest, a stranger in my own house. I didn't confront them that day. I didn't say anything. I just went back to the basement, to my space, my quiet, empty space. I kept telling myself it wasn't true, that they would come around, that this was just a phase, that everything would go back to normal. But I knew it wasn't. The cracks in the foundation had become chasms, and I was standing on the wrong side of them, but I didn't have the strength to leave. I didn't have the courage to confront them. Not yet, so I stayed. I stayed and watched as my family moved forward, leaving me behind in the dust. And that's when I knew it was over. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about a family that had been torn apart, and I had been the one left behind. I wish I could say that the pain stopped once I went back to my basement, but it didn't. That was just the beginning of the real work that needed to be done. I spent my days there in that small, quiet space, the home I had helped build but was no longer a part of. I became a ghost, invisible in a place I had once been the foundation of, and all the while, my mind, the sharp, calculating mind of an accountant, began to shift. The silence of my exile gave way to something else, a quiet fury that I had never allowed myself to feel before. I started with my ledgers. I had kept records, meticulously filed away for years. The habit had been ingrained in me since my accounting days. I didn't know why I had kept every receipt, every canceled check, every bill. Maybe it was just the need to stay organized, to keep track of everything. But I wasn't just a dutiful housekeeper or a mother anymore. I was an investor, an unwilling partner in this venture. And I had the proof. I started gathering the documents, the original bank transfer for the down payment, every grocery receipt, every bill I had paid for the house, every utility charge. I pulled them out one by one, stacking them on the small desk in my basement. My hands trembled as I sorted through them, the years of silence building up inside me. I wasn't just documenting their bills. I was documenting my life, my contributions, my sacrifices. I was writing my story, and I had no intention of letting anyone erase it. For the first time in a long time, I felt the power of what I had done. I had paid for the house. I had kept it running. The mortgage, the utilities, the groceries, I had covered them all, quietly, without ever asking for recognition or help. I realized that the money I had given for their down payment wasn't the only thing I had contributed. It was everything. I was the one who had made sure the house stayed standing. I was the one who had made their lives easier, more comfortable, while I had been pushed aside, locked out. The anger I had tried to suppress began to grow. I had trusted them, I had believed in them, and they had taken everything from me, my savings, my dignity, my future. Now I was ready to take it back. I went to the library, gathering data on the house's market value, researching the appreciation of homes in our neighborhood over the past 15 years. I knew what I had to do. I had to calculate the full extent of my contributions, my investments, and when I was finished, I would take it to a lawyer. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this, not when I had given so much. I found a lawyer who specialized in elder law, someone who would understand the situation. His name was Mr. Okoro, and I found him through a community network. We met in a quiet cafe away from the chaos of downtown, and when I opened the briefcase in front of him, his eyes widened. "This is impressive," he said, his voice low but steady. "It's all here, you've done your homework." I nodded. "I'm not just a mother anymore. I've been an investor in this house, and I've been taken advantage of. I want what's mine." Mr. Okoro studied the documents, his fingers running over the stacks of receipts and checks I had provided. He was methodical, calculating. "You didn't just give them money, Mrs. Adabo. You subsidized their entire lifestyle. You paid for the house, the groceries, the utilities. You were their partner in every sense, even though they never treated you as one. This is not just an emotional claim. This is a financial one, and you have the evidence to back it up." He looked up at me, his expression hardening. "We're not going after a percentage. We're going after everything. We will make sure they pay for this, and we'll make sure you get what's rightfully yours." I felt a rush of satisfaction flood over me. It was the feeling of someone who had been wronged for far too long. And now finally, the tables were turning. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was in control. Mr. Okoro explained the plan. We would let them go through with the sale of the house, let them get to the closing table, let them feel the rush of their impending windfall, and then just before the sale was finalized, we would strike for the first time in years. I felt the weight of all the years of silence, of selflessness, of sacrifice, shift. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about taking back what was mine, my home, my dignity, my place in my family's life. I couldn't help but smile. They had pushed me out, thinking I was weak, thinking I was too old to fight back. But I had spent 15 years quietly observing, keeping track, and now I was ready. I was going to show them that the quiet old woman in the basement had never been as powerless as they thought. The weeks that followed were like something out of a carefully executed plan. On the surface, nothing changed. I played my role, the quiet, defeated mother in the basement, the one who had given up everything for her family, the one they had long since stopped noticing. But inside, I was working. Every document I had collected, every receipt, every canceled check was a piece of evidence, a weapon in a war I had waited too long to fight. They didn't know it, but every day was a step closer to the moment I would take back what was mine. I couldn't confront them yet. I couldn't expose my hand. They needed to believe that I had given up, that I had resigned myself to the way things were. But I hadn't, not at all. As the days passed, the family grew more excited. They had accepted an offer on the house. It was more than they had hoped for. The deal was moving forward. Samuel and Laila were giddy, discussing their next big move, a bigger house, more luxury, more comfort. They were already talking about vacations, about all the things they would do with the windfall from the sale. They spoke of these plans with such confidence, as though they had won. I stayed quiet. I said nothing. I didn't let them see what I had been doing. I let them believe that they had broken me, that their cruel actions had won. But in my heart, I was already one step ahead. The day of reckoning came sooner than they expected. It was a Saturday. The sun was shining, and the house was alive with the sounds of laughter and celebration. The new buyers had agreed to the terms, and they were preparing to close the deal. Samuel and Laila invited me to join them for a celebratory dinner, but I knew what it was. It was their last act of humiliation. They wanted me to sit at the table, the forgotten mother, the one who had helped them all along but was now relegated to the sidelines. I accepted. But in my mind, I had already made my peace. The time had come for me to take control of my story. I dressed in my finest Nigerian lace dress, the one I had saved for special occasions. I wanted them to see me. I wanted them to understand that I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't the silent, invisible woman they had pushed aside. I was reclaiming my place, not just in their lives, but in this house. At the restaurant, everything went as expected. I was seated at the far end of the table, beside a stranger's child, far away from the warmth of their conversation. Samuel and Laila were the picture of success, laughing with their friends, making plans for their new life. I sat there, quiet, observing them. I could feel the weight of their ignorance, of their belief that they had won. And then, in the middle of their celebration, I saw it. Samuel stood up to make a toast. He raised his glass, his voice loud and triumphant. To new beginnings, he declared, a little too enthusiastically, to bigger and better things. Everyone cheered, but I didn't join in. I sat still, my heart calm, knowing what they didn't. Their victory had already been stolen. As they clinked glasses, Kimberly leaned over and whispered to the woman next to her, her voice carrying just enough for me to hear. "We just thought it was time to downsize," she laughed. "And maybe it's time for some other people to do the same." Her eyes flickered toward me for a brief moment, a glance that I could feel, but I didn't flinch. I didn't react. I didn't need to. They had already made their mistake. I stood up, slowly, deliberately. I walked to the back of the room, where I was handed a thick envelope by a process server, who had arrived quietly, unnoticed. I turned and walked through the restaurant toward the table where Samuel and Laila sat, surrounded by their friends. I handed the envelope to Samuel. His face froze when he saw me. His eyes went wide. "What is this?" he asked, his voice shaking. I didn't answer. I simply turned and walked away, leaving him holding the envelope that would change everything. Kimberly grabbed the papers from his hands. "What is this?" she asked, her voice shrill. She skimmed the document, her face draining of color as she read the words. "An emergency injunction to freeze the sale," she gasped. "On what grounds?" I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The evidence was right there in front of them. The battle had been fought and won. They were no longer in control. The following days were a blur of legal battles and negotiations. Their excitement quickly turned to panic. Their lawyer, a man they had trusted to protect them, was no match for the lawyer I had brought in. Mr. O'Caro had laid out our case in court, with undeniable clarity, his voice steady and sure. He presented every receipt, every bill, every document that proved my contributions to the house, to their lives. The judge listened, the evidence overwhelming. The court ruled in my favor. The house, the one I had helped build, the one I had given everything for, was rightfully mine. The judge imposed a constructive trust on the property, granting me full ownership. I walked back into the house, my house, with my head held high. The place I had helped create, the place I had once been pushed out of, was now mine once again. Samuel and Laila stood in the living room, their faces pale, their mouths silent. They didn't know what to say. They didn't have to. "You have 30 days to vacate the premises," I said, my voice calm but unyielding. Their reactions were what I expected: shock, disbelief, anger, but they didn't matter anymore. They had thought they could take everything from me. They had thought they could erase me from their lives. But I had won. And as I stood there, in my own home, I felt the final weight of my loss lift. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I wasn't just a guest. I was the one who had built this house. I was the one who had worked for it, paid for it, fought for it, and now I was going to live in it.